All right, welcome to episode 4 of Wing Nights. I'm back. No baseball tonight. NBA Finals Game 1. We've replaced Josh with the better future Denny, Jade. Jade, a traditional Wing Night associate. We're talking the Game 1. Denver wins in Denver 104-93. We're recording this about 20-some minutes after the final minute buzzer sounded. Biggest thing for me is that the Heat looked soft. They just did not look like the same Miami Heat we had seen in the series before.
I agree. Jimmy Butler, I saw him do this late in the Celtics series, but he just wasn't very aggressive. The one bright spot that I did see with the Heat, aside from I don't know the guy's first name, Highsmith.
Yeah.
Bam Adebayo played the most aggressive I think I've seen him play in the entire playoffs, and I think Jimmy Butler just needs to do more of the same. But Jade, what were your thoughts after game one?
The the Heat, they look tired. I think that's what it is. I thought their best chance to get a game was going to be game one, just to surprise Denver. But man, the Nuggets played so good. Um, even that stretch where Jokic is on the bench, like that secondary group, they played phenomenal. I think their defensive rotations look good. I just don't see how the Heat can match up with that team with especially with Aaron Gordon and Jokic on the floor. That's a hard tandem to guard, and then you have to worry about Jamal Murray, obviously, and they're just so deep with those 3-and-D guys like KCP and what's his name? The Brown guy.
Yeah, Bruce Brown.
I don't want to sound weird about that, but yeah, Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown. I like him.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, looking at like the box score and everything, and you look at this, at the end of game one, if you were to say Bam Adebayo had 26 points and the Heat lost, Miami has to feel more defeated because you gave up maybe what could be Bam's best game in this series in game one, and you don't bring this even within single digits. I think that's frustrating. Looking at this, here's the reaction I wanted to see from you guys, and maybe you watched a full game and you saw the stat at the end, but how many free throws do you think the Heat attempted this game?
It was only two, I think, right?
Yeah, two. They
Which
made
is
both. It was both Highsmith. They attempted two free throws. And to me, we always talk about aggressiveness, like on the defensive side. That's what the Miami Heat are known for throughout these playoffs. But that goes to show that either one, you're not getting calls, or two, you're not getting to the bucket enough. And that's the one thing that the Heat have done is they've imposed their will more often than not throughout all the Eastern Conference series. They had that stretch in the second quarter where they just chucked up like 6 or 7 straight threes in like two possessions, didn't make a single one. And I think that goes to show Spoelstra needs to circle that and just like, guys, we can't win against the Nuggets playing their ball. We have to play our type of offense or we're going to get swept. That's what I kind of took from tonight.
I agree. And I mean, we've talked about the Heat so far, but just how about the Nuggets in terms of I think every player plays their role to perfection on that team. You have Jamal Murray, who he's in the game to score. You have, like Jade said, the 3-and-D guys. You have KCP, guys like
Even
him.
Michael Porter,
Yeah, like
Two blocks tonight.
Yeah.
And then you have Jokic, who's the facilitator. You have Aaron Gordon. His job is to cut, and that's what he does all game, to cut and defend. And I think, honestly, we kind of talked about it in the group chat before, like, how many games does a series go? I think Nuggets win in 6. I think the Heat will figure it out for 2 games. But, man, game 1 was just a Nuggets win from the start.
I feel like I put in the chat that I was confident could be Heat in 7, and then Jade talked me into Heat in 6. But after watching this game, if it's not Nuggets in 5, I don't know what we're doing here. You know what I mean? Like these were the quietest 27 points Jokic has ever scored. It felt like this was a Jamal Murray game. It felt like it was an MPJ game. And again, if you're a Denver fan, you come out of this and you feel real good.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that completely. Yeah, I just for the sake of the fans, I was like, man, I really hope this is a good game tonight. And I mean, there were stretches where both teams, but uh yeah, it's not even in single digits. And I mean, I as a fan, I always want to see a 7 game series, but man, I could see a sweep. I could see the Nuggets getting it in 5. I think I predicted in 6 or less, but I think they have a good chance to obviously make history. Um, but you can never count Jimmy Butler out, especially in the playoffs. Playoff Jimmy is ridiculous. He didn't really show up tonight, and if you have Bam play a game like he did tonight, and then Jimmy comes, it's a whole different story. I don't know. It's a close game for sure, and the Heat are probably winning the game if Jimmy shows up like Jimmy can.
Yeah,
Tate,
and
I have a question for you.
yeah,
So, a slight debate in this one was rest and rust, obviously. So, Denver had no choice. They won in their 4 games. They had to take a while off. I think it was a total of what, 2.5 weeks, maybe a week and a half that they were
Yeah,
off in total.
Mhm.
They last played like middle of May. They take the first game on June 1st, where Miami just flew in from Boston. They had a flight out of Boston in game 7, flew in Monday, overnight Tuesday to get to Denver, and then they played a game Thursday tonight. Do you think that that had anything to do with Miami just having tired legs in altitude? Was Denver just well rested enough? Did that matter? Like, well, what's your take on that?
I
oh, I
certainly
think
think that. Yeah,
yeah, I definitely think that plays a huge role, um in just, especially at the altitude. I know people in the NBA like to downplay it, but that's a different air up there, you know. Uh, and then when you just got done playing a 7 game series, well, a couple 7 game series, because didn't they go 7 games with the Bucks as well? Is that right?
I think they won
Yeah.
5 or 6 or something. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh well, you play all these long series, and then yeah, you're pretty much toast by the finals, and then you have to go to altitude, and you just got done playing a game, and you play a team of whatever it was, 11, 10 day rest. I mean, it has to make a huge difference. It's surprising to see, guys like Bam, who bangs down low all the time, have such a good game tonight, just because you'd think he'd probably be the most tired.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that's probably the most difference in the game is just the legs.
And also, I think that could be a reason for the Heat's lack of free throws was because they're more tired. It takes more energy to drive to the basket
Yeah.
rather than just hawk up a bunch of threes, which they did this game, and they shot very poorly. One of the announcers mentioned it. They were getting good looks. They were just missing shots too. I think they were shooting as a team like 37% in the fourth quarter, and that was throughout the whole game. So, I mean, if you're the Miami Heat, you can look back on this game and your best player didn't play well. Your team shot poorly, and it still wasn't, like a 30-point blowout. So I think you can go into game 2 and say, you know what? If we just shoot like we normally do, if our players play how they usually do, we'll be in a lot better spot.
But you have to take game 2, right? I mean, obviously that's the obvious answer, that you're going to try to win whatever games that you can, but there has to be some sense of urgency, because knowing that you go to Miami and if you're down 2-0, Denver takes one of those games, you feel pretty defeated coming out of that 4 game stretch. So I feel like game 2, if you're going to put a label to it, game 2 to me feels like the most must win out of any of the games upcoming, not 3 or 4. If you can split with Denver and Denver from Miami's perspective, or if you're Denver side, I feel like you can put the Heat away if you're up 2 games and then you head into Miami up 2-0.
I
Agreed.
agree with that. Yep.
Because I think if the Nuggets win the first 2 games, the Heat will probably win one at home. And then it'll be a 3-1 series going back to Denver. And then that's where the Denver team would probably just do the 4-1 gentleman's sweep.
And they're good at closing out series. They've proven that this year
Mhm.
too. I mean, they withstood a late and furious Lakers rally multiple times in the Western Conference Finals, and those 4 games people will call it a sweep, and it was, but those were the most competitive 4 games sweep that you've seen in a long time, especially game 4 in that Western Conference Finals. So if they're going to close out a game, and if you're looking at one of the teams to do it early, Denver's not going to let a team hang around. Miami has been the benefactor at times of course, the last series with the Celtics, that they let a team kind of creep their way back in. But if you're looking for a team that has to pick themselves up, you probably pick Miami. And if you're looking for a team that could close out another team, you're probably picking Denver. So the rubber's going to meet the road here in game 2.
So do you guys think, going back to the Nuggets last series where they swept the Lakers, there was a lot of talk going into the series. I think maybe the Lakers might have even been favored. But do you think the Lakers this year in the playoffs were better than this Miami Heat team?
That's a good question.
Oh man, I think it all depends on how Anthony Davis is playing. It really does. I think that that team, just having him play well makes all the difference. They're a great team, one of the best teams in the NBA when Anthony Davis is playing well, and when he's not playing well, they're not that good. But I think the matchup for Lakers versus Heat, that would have been a good series, and I'm taking the Lakers though.
Yeah, I think it's more of like a question of, do you think the Heat could beat the Lakers, or would, that be a more competitive series than what
Yeah,
this has shown in game 1? I feel like we would have had a more competitive game 1 had it been Heat Lakers, right? I don't know. It just that's a tough thing to ask, because the Lakers were also like on the end of a rope. It felt like they were, by the end of that Denver series, they had put everything into that game 4, and it just still wasn't even enough to get one game. Whereas I think we've all agreed that we'd be pretty shocked at this point if Miami didn't get at least one game in the finals, right? I think that's where I stand.
yeah.
I feel like the most competitive finals that we could have would be Miami Denver, because Miami, I think, can get a game against Denver.
And do you guys think this Nuggets team this is just my personal opinion, but going into the playoffs, I didn't really know how good of a team they actually were, because we've never really seen them healthy in the playoffs. And they were the 1 seed, and the 1 seed is supposed to be the best team in the NBA, the favorite. But I feel like this Nuggets team was never really considered a favorite until they actually got here.
Didn't they feel like the Sixers of the Western Conference? I mean, they just kind of felt like the same way, that they were just going to let you down. They might make a run to the final, like the Western Conference Finals, but they really weren't going to make too much noise. Like, everyone knew that they were probably supposed to be the team there, but one of these bigger names was going to get there. And I think a lot of people, myself included, consider that the Warriors would probably play them, and they'd take, the Warriors would just end up taking them because of experience and everything else. But they made it through, and now that they're here, they feel inevitable. Like, I feel like now that they're here and they're through, they're going to try to break through the cusp. And of course, it comes off of them winning the first game. So a lot of people be pro Nuggets, but it does feel like they have arrived.
And here's another question for you guys about the Nuggets. So I would say it's typical basketball knowledge that to win a championship, you probably need at least 2 all-stars on the same team, or 2 star caliber players. We can debate about Jamal Murray, but when you look at the Nuggets, they only have 1 superstar, and they only have 1 other guy who's maybe a fringe all-star, and then the rest of the team is just great role players. Why do you think they're so good, even if they only just have the 1 superstar? What is it about Denver compared to, let's say, another team? You just brought up the Sixers, who has 1 superstar, and then you can debate about James Harden, whether or not he should have been an all-star this year. But what makes the Nuggets so good?
It's filling the roles. I mean, you got obviously Jokic is the superstar, and he's filling his role perfectly. And then Aaron Gordon, he can basically guard 2 through 5, and easily guard the best big on the floor. He's huge, 7-foot wingspan. I think he's 6'9" or 6'10", and just honestly a freak athlete. And he plays as a freak athlete. And I think they've allowed him to be in Denver. They've allowed him to be less of a go-to guy and take that be that 3rd or 4th guy, and he fills that role a lot better. And then obviously you have Michael Porter Jr., who, you know, I feel like it's always like, is he going to be good? That's how you feel. And then he just, got into this little 3-and-D role. He takes every shot he gets that's open, and sometimes when they're not open, but hey, that's all right too. And then you have KCP, which I honestly really like KCP, even since he was at the Lakers. And I think back in the day, he was trying to get a max deal at the Lakers, and they turned that down. And then he kind of figured out, hey, maybe I'm a 3-and-D guy, and I'm gonna fill that role, and he does it well. And then I don't know who I missed.
Oh, Jamal Murray. Yeah.
Oh, Jamal. I mean, it's Jamal Murray. Like, honestly, in the
The guy
in
with the
the
best game
playoffs,
tonight. Yeah, no
yeah,
biggie.
no, literally. I was like, went over my head. I was trying to think. But Jamal Murray, you could argue that he is an all-star in the playoffs. I think if you just compare his numbers, from uh regular season to the playoffs, he's playing with almost better efficiency, I think, and scoring more, and just doing more on a few more minutes, which is super impressive. So I would say, gosh, he's in the playoffs. He is one of those guys. He is that guy.
Let me make a super loose translation, and this is not comparing the Nuggets to who I'm about to say they remind me of. Far better coach with this team. I think far better all around talent and generational talent. But the Nuggets, in some sense, remind me of like the Popovich late teens and early teens, late 2000 Spurs, because they've got Tim Duncan and Jokic, completely different
Yeah.
players. So hear me out. But both are like the most common guys that you're going to see week in and week out, day in and day out, night in and night out, going to have consistent games. They're going to always be the focal point of every single game. When they show the graphic of the game on ESPN, it's going to be Jokic and Tim Duncan. Jamal Murray reminds me a little bit of Manu Ginobili, because Ginobili was always that fringe all-star. He sometimes would be on fire, and he would have his random 35-point games when the team needed him to have a big game. And Murray did that again tonight. I think he proved that role. And then you look at a guy, this is where the loosest translation comes from, but you look at a guy like Michael Porter Jr., and you kind of think to himself, like, maybe a Danny Green, maybe like a Tony Parker. Not That's a very far translation, but again, that third wheel. And then you look at the other pieces that surround them. I mean, Jade just listed off a bunch of different names that come to mind for the Nuggets. And think of all those different Spurs teams. Like you had guys like Boris Diaw, who rode the bench the entire year, and he would just pop in for one series and play great defense, and then you'd never hear from Boris again for the rest of the playoffs. I think that that's like exactly what this Nuggets team is. I don't doubt that we're going to see Braun have a big game. Brown will have like some huge defensive stop, and then KCP, like you mentioned, he could have some big moment later on. And that's what the Spurs did to people during their title runs, is they always had this extra little piece floating around. It was always the three, but then it came up with someone else. But Tate, kind of back to your original question, they are not the Spurs three, because they're not as talented as those three. They do not have three players that could be all-star considerations. They have 1.5 with Murray and then Jokic, but those role pieces just fit so well with the Nuggets. It's envious if you're any other fan of the league.
I think that's a great comparison because, like you said, it's the Spurs role players that you always think of, the Boris Diaws, the Patty Mills, the Danny Greens. And when you see them go to other NBA teams, they're not really as prevalent. And I think that's probably due to Mike Malone's system in Denver, just his coaching, the way that he's able to utilize each player's talent. But do you guys think this could maybe be a blueprint for what we could see with teams in the future, instead of, we all know about the giant Brooklyn Nets big three, trading for James Harden, Kyrie, KD. Do you think if you're a small market team or maybe even a big market team, that instead of just going for star, 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 you might just get one or two really good players and then try and match them up with the best role players you can?
Well, I mean, isn't that the Bucks? Isn't that what they've done? Essentially, I mean, they developed Giannis, and they knew that Giannis was going to be so raw that then they developed him. Same with the Nuggets. They knew Jokic was not anywhere where he's going to be now. I mean, I just listened to an interview. where they were talking about how Jokic came in like like 80 pounds overweight or something like that and had to do all the cardio before he could even get into basketball. And I agree. I think this is the prime example of a smaller market team. And Denver is probably on that fringe of big to small-ish market of where you want to be when you're in the NBA. The problem is it's the supermax and it's the players' ability to trade themselves across the league. I mean, we saw it with Donovan Mitchell. We've seen it with a couple of these other players from smaller markets that just up and leave or get traded for any reason. And I think the smaller market teams have to realize that your best bet is to get developed players that you develop over time that then feel loyal to you. So you have to treat them well, but then you also have to give them enough pieces around them where they're either comfortable enough or the pieces are talented enough that they want to stay. That's a huge mixture and it's a tough draw, but that's where great GMs show up. And the best GMs are usually in the smaller markets.
I also think there's something to be said too about the foreign players coming in, because you mentioned the Bucks with Giannis. Maybe this is just a me thing, but when I've seen all of the big American draft picks as Zion Williamson, any of those guys, as soon as they come into the NBA, you hear stories about how Zion doesn't want to be in New Orleans. There's a few other examples that are just slipping my mind, but you never heard Jokic doesn't want to be in Denver. Giannis doesn't want to be with the Bucks. Do you think there's actually something to that, or is that just me like?
I actually do think there is something to that, and I'm guessing it's just a lot of these foreign players are just so much more appreciative of the opportunity to come and play in the league. But you see these guys, like some of these top draft picks, like Zion from and he kind of seems like, I don't know if I want to play, like I'm cleared but I'm not cleared, like, and you just kind of wonder, does he just want to go play for the Knicks or something? Like what's his deal? But I also think, a lot of these foreign guys, they have kind of a chip on their shoulder coming into the league, and a lot of these cities, like Dallas, kind of welcoming him in, Doncic with open arms and kind of backing him no matter what and stuff. And you kind of see that. And I mean, there's a reason Dirk stayed there for his whole career. So I think there's definitely something there. I don't know exactly what it is, but a lot of times you see them and they want to stay with those teams, especially when they're the top guys. I think they just kind of walk in and they're like, this is my team now.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think this is my theory, right? And I think maybe Jade, if you agree with me, just chime in here. But I think when the foreign players see the NBA as like the league, right? That they're like, oh, I want to play in the league. I want to play with the best players in the world, and the best players in the world play in the league. Like it's all about the logo, right? Whereas us as like Americans and stuff, we view the NBA as like the entity of basketball, but we recognize that the best basketball players have played for the Lakers. They've played for the Celtics. When we were growing up, they played for the Heat. They played for certain franchises and specific cities. Like those cities matter more, right? We all know the best basketball player of multiple generations played in Chicago. Whereas if you ask like a foreign player, they probably know that Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls, but they probably said that Michael Jordan's the best player in the NBA. Does that kind of make sense? Like what I'm trying to say? I guess I'm trying to like just say that I think them getting to the league is more important than them getting to a specific city, because all the American players are the ones that want to move. They're the ones that need to be in LA. They need to be in Brooklyn. They need to be in New York. They need to be where it's tax free. Wembanyama is going to come to Texas and has no ideas that his taxes are going to be completely like wiped off the board when he moves to San Antonio. But if he was going to instead be drafted by the Knicks, he wouldn't have cared really either way, right? That's my thought, because they don't know the difference.
I think there's definitely something to that.
I think you're spot on.
What do you think about a lot of these players too that come from America? They come out of high school with a mixtape. If they went to college for a year, they're already getting all this attention and stuff. So it's almost like they've made it before they've actually made it to the NBA. Because you saw it was the year that Marvin Bagley was a rookie. You had like the top 6 draft picks coming into the NBA with signature shoes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's almost like you've already reached that point where it's like, well, what else do I need to do? It's like the Heat going up 3-0 at the Celtics. It's like, well, we've already won, so like what else do we need to do? And that's when you start to see the team play more lax. I think that might be something to do with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's, the Americanization of America's one of the most popular sports with basketball. It's one of the toughest things that I think just the talent growing up has to deal with, because again, the one and done, you get all the attention from that one year. You're a highly prized recruit. You have to go in, you play at a premier program, and the one and done itself might have created this player promotion itself too, because if you think about it, you encourage players to become the best name in the country out of high school, going to the biggest and best programs where then they can lead and go into an even better opportunity where they get a bigger shoe deal, then they're drafted higher because they played at Duke or North Carolina, or they played at UCLA, or they played at any of these other schools. Then they come to the league, and as soon as the league doesn't present them a winnable situation or a situation that benefits them, they're ready to move on because that's what they've been used to. That's what they've been told to do. And so now they're bred to do it. I mean, it's maybe the league had created their own issue when they created kind of the basis all the way to where it is now.
Yeah, you definitely see, especially in college, if you're not one and done, you might have played at 2 or 3 different schools, which is, to me, that sounds crazy. But so what's the difference? You sign a contract with an NBA team, and you're like, hey, this isn't working out. I'm going to demand a trade, or I'm not going to play. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's basically bred into those kids because they think that's just how it can be. And so, and I have no problems with players getting traded and moved around and going, if like Derrick Rose, I think he should get somehow get signed by the Chicago Bulls just to go back there. I mean, like a homegrown Chicago guy. And but it's like, how many teams, it used to be a lot of these we'd make fun of players if they played for 7 or 8 teams. They were just a journeyman running all over the league. Every year they're in a different jersey. But now it's like, man, you could be in 3 or 4 jerseys in a 10-year career, and it's that, that's fine. And I'm fine with it. I mean, it makes for interesting basketball sometimes.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting point, where some of these guys, it seems like when they get to the league from, out of the country, they're like, this is my team. And I wonder if that's
we'll have to ask our co-host Josh as to why he moved from a small market team in Minden to the big market of Cozad. Maybe he'll give us the right insight.
Yeah, he could give us the firsthand experience of player empowerment.
Yeah, I didn't want to live on the highway anymore. I thought it was more important that I was on the interstate.
He might have started that movement. It might have started all with him. Now that I think about it,
yeah,
it's about the right time. So
yeah, makes sense. Tate, as we're wrapping up here, we've gotten a little off course, but obviously it's wing night, so you never know where we could be going to. But final thoughts: Denver winning by 11, game 1. What about game 2? What do you feel?
I think Denver wins game 2. I think they're going to take both games at home. I think this series is 5 or 6 games. Unless Jimmy Butler can play, have one of his vintage Jimmy Butler playoff games, I just don't think the Heat win.
All right, guys, write this down. 114 Denver Nuggets, 103 Miami Heat.
140 Denver Nuggets, 103 Heat, as I said.
Yep. I think the Heat win in 5. Or not the Heat, man. I'm it's getting late, I guess.
Like what you just said cannot happen with your prediction.
No, not at all. No, I think that the Nuggets will win in 5. I think but I do think the Heat, they have to get a game in, and I just don't know if it's the next one.
Yeah, let's hope that no one goes to the John Morant clubs in Denver tonight. So we'll go. I'll take. I think the Heat could be close. And just to be devil's advocate here, I will take the Heat. I think Jimmy comes back with a vengeance. I'm going to say Jimmy drops 36
I
and
like it.
Heat win just a grinder, like a 92-88 game. And then watch. I was so wrong about the Celtics game in that one, so don't even listen to what I have to say. I mean, I'm the least basketball knowledge in this entire chat.
That's okay. You make up for it with your Mac Miller stories.
It's one good thing I brought to this show so far.
All right. Well, I think that's time for us. So, Jade, thank you for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Anytime.
He is an official. We're gonna call him the sixth man of the show. He just fills in, he's been a loyal Wing Knights member over the past few years as well. So before we did the show. So yeah, it's good to have him.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Yep. Till next time.
Yep.